Dear students, welcome back. In the previous session, we have discussed about peritoneum part 1. In that introduction, we have discussed about the location of the peritoneum and its divisions of the peritoneum as parietal layer and visceral layer. And we have discussed what are the organs which are related to the peritoneum, that is intraperitoneal visceral organs, extraperitoneal visceral organs, or retroperitoneal visceral organs, subperitoneal visceral organs, like that. We have discussed what are the organs which are related to the peritoneum. And also we have discussed the terminology of the peritoneal folds, that is mesentery, omenta and ligaments. Now in this session we are going to discuss about the peritoneal cavity and its divisions, and also the functions of the peritoneum and the clinical anatomy related to the peritoneum. Okay, and now we will see the peritoneal cavity. The viscera which invaginate the peritoneal cavity completely fill it so that the cavity is reduced to a potential space separating adjacent layers of peritoneum. So if you can say this thing, these are the organs. Okay, the entire thing is peritoneal cavity. Once these visceral organs are invaginated, you can see the space is reduced in between this parietal and visceral layer. Okay, yes. So simply we can say the peritoneal cavity is a potential space that exists between the parietal and visceral layers of the peritoneum. Okay. And these layers, between these layers, there is a thin film of serous fluid secreted by the mesothelial cells. Okay, the fluid performs a lubricating function and allows free movement of one peritoneal surface over the another. Okay, so under abnormal conditions, if there is an extra collection of fluid, is called as ascites, or if in the peritoneal fluid, if blood is accumulated, then it is called as hemoperitoneum, or if air is present in the peritoneal cavity, and this one is called as pneumoperitoneum. So all these conditions occurs within the peritoneal cavity. Okay. And this peritoneal cavity is broadly divided into two parts. One is the lesser sac and greater sac. Okay, lesser sac and greater sac. The entire peritoneal cavity is divided into lesser sac and the greater sac. Okay. So the main larger part is known as greater sac. So the entire brownish part is the greater sac. So these two are sagittal sections only. Okay. So the main larger part is known as greater sac, and the smaller part, so this is actually stomach. So on the backside or behind the stomach, the smaller part is situated behind the stomach, as well as the lesser omentum. Okay, so the smaller part is situated behind the stomach, the lesser omentum, and also liver. So stomach, lesser omentum, and the liver. Behind these three structures we can find this lesser sac. Okay, so and these two sacs are communicated by a foramen. So the greater sac as well as the lesser sac. So greater sac is also present on the anterior aspect and inferior, and some posterior part includes the greater sac. If you can see the lesser sac, this is the sac which occupies behind the stomach and the lesser omentum and the liver forms the lesser sac, and this greater sac and the lesser sac are connected by a foramen called as epiploic foramen. This foramen is also called as foramen of Winslow or opening into the lesser sac. Okay, so these are the divisions. So the entire peritoneal cavity is divided into larger part called as greater sac and smaller unit called lesser sac, and these two, greater sac and lesser sac, are connected by an opening called as epiploic foramen. Okay, this foramen is also called as foramen of Winslow or opening into the lesser sac. Okay, and also in the peritoneal cavity, in relation to the peritoneal cavity, some pocket-like or recesses are related to the peritoneal cavity, which are also same as like peritoneal cavity. Okay, so these are also the parts of the peritoneal cavity which are separated from the main cavity by small folds of peritoneum. Okay, these such kind of folds of the peritoneum is called as small pockets or recesses. Okay, for it there are number of recesses are present. So some of the examples are the duodenal recesses, cecal or ileocecal recesses, and recesses of the sigmoid mesocolon. So like that, there are number of recesses are present inside the peritoneum. Here I'm showing one example, that is ileocecal recesses. So it is having two recesses. One is the superior ileocecal recesses and inferior ileocecal recesses. So these are small pocket-like small folds of peritoneum. Here you can see small folds of peritoneum which are separated from the main peritoneal cavity. Okay, and these recesses will have some clinical importance. Normally internal hernia may take place into these recesses. Okay, so and also some kind of spaces which are also present and also related to this peritoneum. So for example, subphrenic spaces. So this subphrenic spaces, so it is a space between liver and the diaphragm. A space is present between the liver and the diaphragm. So we can see some sort of spaces, so that we can study separately as subphrenic spaces. Okay, so this is about the peritoneal cavity. This peritoneal cavity is a potential space that exists between parietal and visceral layers of the peritoneum. Okay, and it is filled with a serous fluid which are secreted by the mesothelial cells. And this entire peritoneal cavity is divided into greater part and smaller unit. Greater part is nothing but greater sac, and the smaller unit is called as a lesser sac. And these two sacs are connected by a foramen or an opening called as epiploic foramen or foramen of Winslow. If you see the differences between the male peritoneum and female peritoneum, there are some differences we can find out with male and female peritoneum. Okay, so this is the peritoneum of male and this is the female part. So here in the male, the peritoneum is completely closed. So if you can see this peritoneum here, this is the end of the peritoneum. So here the peritoneum is completely closed here. The peritoneum is completely closed in the case of male. There is no opening here. Okay, so it is completely closed. Whereas in the female, it communicates with the exterior. So it communicates with the exterior through the fallopian tubes, uterus and vagina. So this peritoneal cavity is communicating with the exterior through the fallopian tubes, uterus and vagina. Okay, and this and also some other features we can see in the female peritoneum is, one is the peritoneal cavity communicates exterior with the through the uterine tubes and uterus and vagina. The peritoneum covering the ovaries, are lined by cubical epithelium, and the peritoneum covering the fimbria is lined by columnar ciliated epithelium. So you can find this. So this is the ovary. So this ovary is covered by peritoneum, which is made up of with cubical epithelium. This is the fimbria. So this fimbria is normally called as some finger-like projections which are seen on the fallopian tubes. It appears to be in the shape of fingers. So these are some of the tissue projections that are coming out of the fallopian tubes. Okay, so these are covered by the peritoneum, which is lined by columnar ciliated epithelium. These are the differences we can see in between the male and female peritoneum. Now coming to the functions of the peritoneum. Okay, the peritoneum mainly helps in the movements of the viscera. Okay, so that means it provides a slippery surface for free movements of the abdominal viscera. So during peristaltic movements, it can move freely one over the other. Okay. Next, and also helps in the abdominal movements during respiration and periodic changes in the capacity of hollowing the viscera associated with their filling and evacuation. Okay, the efficiency of the intestine is greatly increased as a result of the wide range of mobility that is possible because the intestines are suspended by these large folds. Okay, because of these large folds, the movements of the intestines will have a wide range. Okay, next one is this peritoneum protects the viscera. How it can protect means the peritoneum contains various phagocytic cells which guard against infection. The lymphocytes which are present in the normal peritoneal fluid helps in defense mechanisms. The greater omentum, so this is the greater omentum, you can see here, this is the greater fold, greater omentum, and this one is the transverse colon. So the connection between the stomach and the transverse colon, that is omentum sheet. Okay, this greater omentum has the power to move towards the sites of infection and to seal them thus preventing the spread of infection. So the greater omentum is called as policeman of the abdomen. Okay, and it also helps in absorption. So the mesothelium of the visceral layer acts as semi-permeable membrane across which fluids and small molecules of various solutes can pass. So thus the peritoneum can absorb fluid effusions from the peritoneal cavity. Okay. Yes. Next one is the healing or regeneration. Okay, the mesothelial cells of the peritoneum can transform into fibroblasts which promote healing of wounds. And also it is having capacity to form abnormal adhesions causing obstruction in hollow organs. Okay, next one, it helps in the storage of fat. Peritoneal folds. So these peritoneal folds are capable of storing large amount of fat, which is commonly seen in obese persons. So these are all the functions of the peritoneum. Now we'll move on to clinical anatomy of the peritoneum. Yes. So the first one, the collection of free fluid in the peritoneal cavity. This is the normal peritoneum, and so this is the abnormal peritoneum. So the collection of the free fluid in the peritoneal cavity is known as ascites. So the common causes for such kind of ascites is cirrhosis of liver or any tubercular peritonitis, that is infections, during congestive heart failure, and also in malignancies of the peritoneum. Okay, and also the veins get prominent in the cirrhosis of liver. Okay, so this is about the ascites. And next one is the procedure called as paracentesis. So fluid from the peritoneal cavity may be removed by puncturing the abdominal wall, either in the median plane midway between the umbilicus and pubic symphysis. So these are the puncture sites. These X are the puncture sites. Okay, to remove the excess fluid. So one site is puncturing the abdominal wall either in the median plane midway between the umbilicus and the pubic symphysis, or at a point just above the anterior superior iliac spine. Okay, so the procedure is called as paracentesis. Okay, during this procedure the urinary bladder must be emptied. Okay, next another condition is called as peritonitis. Inflammation of the peritoneum is called as peritonitis. It may be localized, that means any one part of the peritoneum, or localized when if any particular organ is infected, or it may be generalized. So if it is not treated properly, it becomes a very serious problem. So this is the peritoneum. This is the normal healthy peritoneum, and this one is the some accumulation of fecal matter and purulent material present through the abdomen. So this is the peritonitis. So inflammation of serous layers leads to peritonitis. Okay, and next condition, if you can see, related to the clinical anatomy, that is pneumoperitoneum. The presence of air in the peritoneal cavity is called as pneumoperitoneum. It may occur after perforation of the stomach or intestines. That means any during any surgical process. So there may be if they make a hole to insert some equipments or instruments like this, then there may be a chance of getting air into the peritoneal cavity. So here you can see in this X-ray, this is right hemidiaphragm and this one is the left hemidiaphragm. In this right hemidiaphragm, below this diaphragm you can see some air bubble. So this is the air bubble which is present in the peritoneal cavity. Okay, next, another thing. So it is an examination procedure called as laparoscopy. Laparoscopy is the examination of the peritoneal cavity under direct vision during an instrument called laparoscope. They can use this laparoscope to see this peritoneal cavity as well as the internal organs. Okay, next, laparotomy. So this is laparotomy is opening up the abdominal cavity. Here you can see this is the opening of the abdominal cavity by a surgeon is called as laparotomy. And also I have mentioned that this greater omentum limits the spread of infection by sealing off the site of ruptured vermiform appendix or gastric ulcers and tries to delay the onset of peritonitis. So it is called as abdominal policeman. We can also mention the same thing here in the clinical anatomy. Okay. So next one is the another procedure called as peritoneal dialysis. So this is the peritoneal dialysis is done in case of renal failure. So the procedure removes the urea as it diffuses through the blood vessels into the peritoneal cavity. Here they have used this dialysate bag and they have a catheter into the peritoneum and then they drain this infected fluid into the drainage bag. So this is called as peritoneal dialysis. Okay, these are all about the clinical anatomy related to the peritoneum. So in the next sessions we are going to discuss about this folds, that is omentum and the greater sac and lesser sac, their boundaries and their relations. Everything we are going to study in detail in the next session. So these are all about the general things of peritoneum. We can see the terminology related to the peritoneum in peritoneum part 1 and part 2. Thank you.